Access to Democracy is made possible by donations from the following organizations. Thomson Reuters, a global company with expertise and insight to unravel complex situations in the areas of law, tax, compliance, government, and media. Their worldwide network of journalists and editors keep customers up to speed on relevant global events. Thomson Reuters, The Answer Company. Crutchfield Dermatology, a full-service treatment center and Medi-Spa in Eagan. Their goal is to help you look good and feel great with beautiful skin. The Minnesota Twins are looking forward to another great season in 2023, led by the return of All-Stars Carlos Correa and Brian Buxton. With the return of numerous players who were injured in 2022 and some new acquisitions, another division crown and a return to the World Series are in their sights. Established in 2007, 45th Parallel Spirits was among the first 50 micro-distilleries in the United States. Based in New Richmond, Wisconsin, all aspects of production occur at our facility. If you're interested in visiting and learning more about the 45th Parallel Distillery, please check our website and plan a visit to tour our facility and taste our spirits. Truestone Financial, with locations in Minnesota and Wisconsin, has proudly served its members since 1939. Truestone engages, educates, and supports its members to ensure they have the tools to empower their financial well-being. Truestone Financial, your neighborhood credit union. Learn more at truestone.org.
Hello and welcome to Access to Democracy. Thank you for joining us. I'm Bill Raker, the host for this edition of the program. Today we're going to be talking about a cooperative approach to energy. And we have the perfect person as our guest today to do that. Welcome, Ryan Hentges, President and CEO of Dakota Electric Association.
Thank you, Bill. It's great to be here today.
Well, we're looking forward to this discussion, and as I said, you're the perfect person to share with us what a cooperative approach to providing energy to consumers and to businesses is all about. And before we get into that, though, you recently became the president and CEO of DEA, or Dakota Electric Association, succeeding Greg Miller, who retired, I think, in April. So share with our viewers a little bit about yourself and your background and what your role is at Dakota Electric.
Sure. So I grew up south of St. Cloud, north of Clear Lake. So I'm Minnesota native. Spent a little bit of time at Cargill professionally, and eventually moved into the co-op world right around 2005. Worked as a Vice President of Corporate Services at Minnesota Valley Electric Cooperative, and then ultimately CEO at Minnesota Valley, where I was until just this last April. Lived in Lakeville for about 18 years with my wife Carrie, daughter Isabel, and Ella. So enjoy the area, know the area, and it was really fun to have the opportunity to get to move to Dakota Electric. Absolutely trying to fill some big shoes with Greg Miller, who had been Dakota's CEO for 20-some years. Obviously a leader in both the cooperative energy environment, but also locally as well. So I'd known Greg over the years, have a lot of respect for him. So was very anxious, excited to move into that role, the role of President and CEO, and feel very fortunate to be in that role. So as President and CEO, I report to the Board of Directors. Cooperative is has a democratically elected board, elected by our members, those that we serve electricity to. My role is to move the organization in the direction that they see fit. So they set the overall policy, the board sets the overall policies and strategic direction of the organization, working with staff, and then it's our job and my job to carry out those objectives. So it's a leadership role. I love working with people. It's something where we have right around 200 employees, team members at Dakota Electric, very focused on service to our members. An organization I feel very lucky to be at and very proud to represent. So
a cooperative is run fairly similar to most ordinary businesses, then, it sounds like. Is that right?
To a certain extent, with a couple of key differences. A cooperative is a not-for-profit organization, so any profits or margins that we make on a yearly basis wind up going back to those that buy electricity from us. And then the board of directors is elected by the membership as a whole. So 115 to 120,000 members get to vote for who represents them on our board of directors. So maybe a couple of differences that is maybe unique for the cooperative environment.
So one of the benefits of a structure like this cooperative is something called capital credits. And I want to come back to that later and let you explain to our viewers what capital credits are.
Yeah.
But Ryan, it sounds like as you stepped into this leadership role at DEA, you didn't have to leave home, so to speak.
No.
I mean, you were already right here. But was there something memorable or significant in your experience in your career before you got to Dakota Electric that maybe has had an impact on the way you run a business?
Sure. Yeah, and I'll tell a little bit of a story here. And when I was thinking about this, and something that really impacted me, but also can kind of explain what a co-op is and how a co-op works. So it was about 10 years ago. And I was at the other cooperative, Minnesota Valley Electric Co-op, and we were looking at ways to engage our members, but also manage the cost of electricity. So one of the concepts that we came up with was this game where we allow members to compete against each other to see who can utilize the least amount of electricity at specific times. So we call it the Beat the Peak Energy Challenge. And again, as a not-for-profit organization, by our members reducing their usage at key times, that reduced the co-op's need to buy more expensive power. So we just passed that savings on to those that participated. So we had about 2,000 members participate, compete against each other, but then we also had about 15 teams. And a team is a collection of individuals, homes, that decide as a group they're going to work together, reduce their usage at key times, and then that group, if that group wins, they get the money. So top prize was $7,500, so that was enough to incent a lot of nonprofits and different organizations to participate and compete. So what transpired is, so we had right around 15 of these teams competing against each other to use as little as possible at key times. So we'd send a message out and say, hey, tomorrow between 5 to 9, between those time frames, use as little as possible. And then we measured that usage reduction, and then each team or each person got credit for that reduction. So we kept track through about a three and a half month time frame. And then we had this award ceremony at the end where we had brought pizza and invited all of those that had participated in, and we announced the grand prizes and who had won. And what was interesting is the top winning team was a team of 27 homes. So 27 neighbors got together, and they said, okay, we're going to go after this. We're going to reduce our usage. We're going to communicate with each other, have grill outside each other's houses to reduce our usage. They won, and what they wound up doing is they split. So then they split the $7,500. But then at the ceremony where we were talking about all this, they gave those checks to a family whose son was going through chemotherapy. So when you think about it, it's a way that, when we talked about a cooperative approach, looking for ways, to educate people about the cost of electricity, that it costs different amounts at different times, educating how they can help and work together to be part of a solution. But then as a cooperative, we're not keeping those profits, rather we're sending them back to the members. And then what people wind up doing is just amazing that they didn't keep the money for themselves, they gave it to someone else. So a story that reminds me that as a utility, as a cooperative, we need to look for innovative ways to engage with our members as we move forward. But then also focused on, as a cooperative, it's not about the profits, it's about service, it's about interaction with our communities and our members.
Well, that's a great story, Ryan. Thank you for sharing that with us. I mean, it's an unusual concept to have a game that's focused on, let's see how much less energy or electricity we can use. Has something like that come into play at Dakota Electric?
Well, we're still looking at it. So we haven't done the game yet, but one thing that Dakota Electric is absolutely an industry leader in is this concept of load management. So a lot of our members participate on an air conditioner program. We've got different electric vehicle charging programs, which is the same concept, not necessarily the game, but it's a direct financial incentive for participating on those programs.
The objective is the same.
The objective is the same. It's it's we pass on the savings when we don't have to buy that high cost electricity.
Well, Dakota Electric has been around for a while. Could you tell us a little bit about how and why and when Dakota Electric got started?
Yeah, it's a great story, and it's something that. So 1936, I think right around 1936, farmers in this area started to get together as the federal government was starting to make funding available through the Rural Electric Association. So a way to bring low-cost funding to rural areas to actually electrify rural areas. What had happened before that is investor-owned utilities focused on the most dense areas because that's the easiest way to make, from a profit perspective, the easiest cost structure. So this was a new way of electrifying the rural areas, and it really required the communities coming together and the farmers coming together and saying, we're going to move this direction. It was in 1937 that the first articles and bylaws were established for Dakota Electric Association. So at that point, we were, it was just starting, and to think about the growth of this area and the growth of Dakota Electric from, 2 members now to over 115,000 is a pretty impressive story. I know in a previous session you had Matt Carter from Dakota County Historical Society.
We did, yes.
And they've got a great exhibit on Dakota Electric and how it's transformed over the years. But we really see ourselves as being part of the community and transforming with the community, and really a mindset of service to the community that we've really grown out of over the years.
Well, in a sense, Dakota Electric then has really been a key factor in the development and growth and significance of Dakota County.
Well, we like to think so. I mean, it's participating, bringing, electrical service, which, I've, over the years of being in the cooperative environment, I've had a number of opportunities to talk to members that were there when the lights first got turned on, and the changes that made either on the farm, in the home, but overall in their lifestyle. It was a proverbial game changer, and really allowed a lot of expansion and quality of life.
I imagine there are a few people left in the world who remember not having electricity in their homes and in their businesses. Yeah. You mentioned, Ryan, that you have Dakota Electric has 115,000 member users. Yeah. Are those homes, or does that include commercial businesses as well?
It includes both.
Does it?
Yep. Mm-hmm. So right around 115 to 120,000 total users. As far as who's buying the kilowatt hours, so our electricity from us, residential accounts for right around 60% of the total kilowatt hours purchased. Right around 40% is commercial load. So there's quite a bit of commercial activity in this area, which is which again is fairly unique for cooperatives. A lot of times cooperatives wind up being mostly a rural residential load. So with Dakota Electric, there's quite a bit of commercial activity.
So when you think about Dakota Electric, I always think about Dakota County. Mm-hmm. But really, Ryan, what is the geographical area that Dakota Electric serves?
Sure. It's right around 500 square miles, a little bit over 500 square miles. But if you think of it, by landmarks, generally on the west side, it's 35. So we go 35, go a little bit west of 35 in some areas, but generally 35 up to 13, down the Mississippi River to 19 coming across on the bottom. So generally that area, as you may know, service territory lines. So Minnesota has defined service territories for utilities. So I say that's a general area. There's Xcel Energy has some service territory within that general area as well. Those territories were defined by legislature a number of years ago. So generally that's our service territory, but there are always some exceptions within that.
And typically, utilities, like an electrical company, doesn't have competitors in the market that they serve. Is that the case here?
Yeah, not in the traditional sense. Now, I would say our mindset is a competitive nature because we feel we owe that to our members to be competitive, to keep our rates competitive, to compare ourselves from a reliability perspective, member satisfaction perspectives with our neighboring utilities. So we have a competitive mindset, but not a traditional competitive environment in which someone can take our territory, we can take someone else's.
Well, it's the mindset that really matters.
I'd like to think so, yes.
So to make a distinction here, Dakota Electric is a cooperative that buys and distributes electrical energy, electrical power. So tell us a little bit more about how you source the energy that you then redistribute to your customer users.
Yeah, it's a good question. It's an important distinction in understanding. The energy business is pretty complex with a lot of different players. Generally, there's generation, transmission, and distribution. That goes into getting the electrons from, electrons have to be generated somewhere, then they have to be transmitted over the transmission lines, and then it comes to our substations locally where we then take it to the homes, to the businesses within our service territory. So back in the 70s, Dakota Electric with a number of other cooperatives created what we call a G&T, a generation and transmission organization that provides the generating and the transmission services. So right now, today, that organization is known as Great River Energy. Dakota Electric has 2 board members. So Great River Energy is also a cooperative. So again, any margins that they have above what they need to run the organization come back to us locally. Great River Energy has a board of directors. 2 of Dakota Electric's directors, Margaret Schreiner and Clay Van de Bogart, are on the Great River Energy board of directors. So we buy all of our generation and all of our transmission services from Great River Energy.
And so that typically has been power generated from the burning of fossil fuels.
Yep.
But we all know that there's a big push to transition to other sources of energy, more renewable kinds of energy. What's Dakota Electric's vision for that, and what's underway to take us in that direction?
Yeah, it's an important question. And our approach is a responsible and balanced approach to that transition. Great River Energy, a number of years ago, already started that transition back in early 2000s with some wind, some purchase of wind contracts, to some early depreciation of coal assets. Most recently, I believe it's 2020, the sale of their Coal Creek Station, which was a coal plant. Right now, Great River Energy is probably around 25 to 30%, somewhere around there, I believe, renewable or carbon-free. By 2025, the expectation is to be at, I think 2025 is around at 30% carbon-free. By 2035, the expectation is Great River Energy's generation portfolio will be 90% carbon-free. So there's a good trajectory, a good plan in place for achieving what I'm sure you know about with the state's recent standard for carbon-free by 2040. So Great River Energy has been planning for that for a while and setting themselves up for a responsible transition to that. The last point I might make is there's 2 different pieces to the generation puzzle. One is the amount of electricity bought over time, but then there's also the ability to meet the requirements of those who buy electricity from you at any specific time. So that means if you go back to last December, I think December 23rd, when it's cold out and electric load is very high, we have to be able to meet that and ensure that our members have the energy they need. Great River Energy's peaking plants, which are natural gas plants backed up by fuel oil, are able to meet that customer need. So we're able to balance a transition with renewables, to renewables, along with the ability to meet our members' needs at any time with what we call dispatchable generation. So it seems like a good setting right now.
So it sounds like the vision and the mission, the plan for you and for Dakota Electric is to get as green as you can, as reasonably fast as you can. What are some of the key challenges and obstacles that you're going to have to overcome to achieve those goals that you set?
Yeah, it's a great question. A number of different items come into play. You know, as is talked across the business world right now, supply chain, being able to get the necessary components for additional solar, additional wind. Permitting of transmission lines winds up being an important item. In order to achieve some of those renewable goals, we need to be able to get electricity from the wind farms, from the solar fields, to our local areas, and that requires investments in transmission. So that's one of them. You know, I mentioned right now we're on a path for 90% by 2030. As different technologies evolve, to meet that need, that we have what we call dispatchable generation at any time, so we can ensure that we have enough generation to meet our members' load. You know, we're going to be looking at battery technology. There's a variety of other items as they develop. Could they help us with that? Those are things that'll develop over time. We don't have for sure, this is exactly how 100% is going to happen by 2040. We can get 90%. The remaining 10%, we're going to have to learn over the coming years and innovate and go that direction.
It won't be easy.
A lot of complicating factors.
But the outcome will be good for all of us.
I think we'll get there.
So, Ryan, in September, there was an op-ed article in the Star Tribune, and the headline said, "We're going to need a bigger grid." Tell us what that means.
Yeah. So here's my understanding of it. So, you know, it really was a discussion around transmission. So earlier I mentioned there's a generation, there's a transmission, and then there's the distribution. The transmission is necessary to get the generation to the distribution. Well, as we're building these resources, wind, solar in different areas, we need to ensure that the transmission system is able to handle that. So right now, across this general area, there's around, I think, $10 billion of investments planned on transmission. In addition, in the coming years, there's conversations around another $20 to $30 billion being invested in transmission. Concept being, if you can get those low-cost renewables to the load centers, then that's overall cost effective. So it might be a little bit more in transmission, but then hopefully the generation costs come down a little bit.
So that's the grid is just one of the elements of infrastructure that we as a society, as a country, need to invest in order to meet these goals of being carbon-free throughout the next decades or so. Well, that's a challenge, as we all know, but there's a lot of good science driving the reasons for us as a society to be doing those kinds of things. You know, Ryan, as we come down to the last couple of minutes of our program today, I said earlier I wanted to ask you about capital credits. I got some of them recently.
Oh, great, excellent.
It's kind of a unique thing that is attributable to the structure of a co-op. So tell us what capital credits at Dakota Electric are all about.
Sure. So capital credits are really just us returning the investment our members make in the organization to them over a period of time. So if you think about it, any business, you've got you've got your cost, you've got your revenues. Hopefully the revenues are higher than the cost, and then that margin will either go to investors, or in our case, it goes back to our members. So we call them capital credits, but it's really just giving money back to our members that have invested and bought electricity with us over time. So there's a process, a detailed process about how that takes place and over what time frame they take place. But the essence is just it's returning those excess margins back to our members.
And as a cooperative, the retained earnings is really the only way you have of generating capital. Is that true?
Well, generating capital, so we work with a number of lenders, so different lenders, really specific to the cooperative market. But yeah, so either debt issuances or the retained earnings, and then returning those over time.
Well, Ryan, we wrap up with the final minute. Any last thoughts to leave our viewers about Dakota Electric?
Well, first of all, thanks for your time today. I really appreciate being on the program. And just as a reminder, Dakota Electric is a community organization. Everyone else gets up in the morning in our community, goes to work in different areas. We come to work focused on bringing safe, reliable, affordable electricity to our communities. And we appreciate the opportunity to serve this area, and we look forward to talking with our members at any time.
Ryan, thanks for being our guest today and talking to us about a cooperative approach to energy. It's been very interesting and very informative. So we appreciate your time and the information that you shared with us today. Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you, Bill.
And thank you for watching Access to Democracy.